I'm Peter Marks, and I reviewed theater for the Washington Post and the New York Times. And now I write mostly for myself.
You make it sound so sad, but it's not at all. First of all, that's not true. And I'm Elisabeth Vincentelli, and I currently write about theater for the New York Times and the Washington Post, among other places. We're here for you with another episode of Marks and Vincentelli, the podcast for people who share our devotion to art on stage. And sometimes things on stage that are not art at all, but we like it anyway.
You heard her say that. On today's podcast, we're going to talk to a pair of cats lovers. You know, cats are much in the news these days in politics. But
Being myself, by the way, a childless... Oh, I don't have a cat, but...
You have a rabbit. You're a rabbit lady.
I'm even worse. I'm a childless rabbit lady. I'm like their worst nightmare.
Oh, the little biographical details that come out on this podcast.
Right.
This, though, is about Cats, the musical, or rather, Cats, the Jellicle Ball, which is soon to end a smash hit run at the spanking new Perelman Performing Arts Center in Lower Manhattan. What you're going to hear today is from its co-directors, Zhailon Livingston and Bill Rauch, and how they put together this new version of Andrew Lloyd Webber's modern classic, which, of course, everyone knows is set to the poems of T.S. Eliot's Old Possum's book of Practical Cats.
So Zhailon and Bill are going to take us inside their ballroom adaptation of Sir Lloyd Webber's work.
Lord Lloyd Webber. He's a lord, not a sir.
He's a lord, he's not a sir. See, I don't
Correct.
even know. Like, I don't know the difference between the two. Aren't they all the same?
No. That's the House of Lords. It's like he sits in the House of Lords. Sure.
He does? Yeah. Which one is a sir? What's Ian McKellen? Is he a sir or a lord?
He's a sir. You get knighted, and then the next level up is a lord.
He's above Ian McKellen?
Yes. So Lord Olivier, remember Laurence Olivier?
Oh, yeah.
He was a lord.
Olivier, did you just say that?
He was a lord. Well, you're a young girl. You're a very young girl. Well, I am
especially not a Britishophile, so
that's true.
As is very clear from this conversation. They're going to tell us how they came up with that idea to do it as a ballroom competition, how they found their cast, what happened when they met the Lord, and we're going to even try to get a sense of if this is going to have a life. I hope it has like 19 lives or however lives cats have. Like, is it like 9, 19, yes. 90? No, I know they have 9.
You're a rabbit
kidding.
Lady. You don't understand cats, obviously.
That's right.
So Zhailon Livingston is really an up-and-coming theater maker in New York and beyond. In his own bio, he said he has gone from selling tickets and refreshments in Broadway theaters to directing on Broadway. He made his debut a couple of seasons back with Chicken and Biscuits, and is directing currently Table 17 at MCC Theater. He teaches the Theater and Change course at Columbia University, and he was also a resident director and an associate director of other productions, among them on Broadway, the Tina Turner musical, and has been as far away as South Korea doing Hadestown.
And Bill was a longtime artistic director at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival in Ashland, Oregon. And New York audiences know him for directing Robert Schenken's Tony-winning All the Way with Bryan Cranston, playing Lyndon Johnson. And then Bill did the sequel, The Great Society, which was with Brian Cox, also on Broadway.
Oh, right.
Which both of them originated at OSF,
right?
Yes.
Right.
And he's now the inaugural artistic director of the Perelman Pack, which is in a kind of crazy marble cube.
Yeah.
And listeners, if you ever go there on a rainy day, be very careful because those steps are a death trap. Those steps are so slippery.
There's a lot of steps, too.
Oh, there's a lot of steps outside. But
there's an elevator.
Yes. There's and an escalator hidden on the side.
Oh, there is? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, really?
So, anyway, without further ado, welcome Bill and Zhailon.
So let's just get down to basics here. You know, Cats is, it's a musical that strikes joy in the hearts of many theatergoers and fear in the stomachs of others. It's we had this long-running Broadway hit, and then this 2019 film version, which was very controversial, of that not even Andrew Lloyd Webber liked. So the question is, what possessed you guys to think of transforming this show?
Well, Bill got possessed first, so I'll let him take it.
And it was a possession. Well, it's funny. I misremembered the origin story. I thought that it's something I started to think about when I did the Queer Oklahoma.
I was going to ask you about that. So, okay, well, but let's do it now then. All right, perfect.
So I had a kind of 25-year dream to do a production of Oklahoma with Laurie and Curly as two women, and Ado, Andy, and Will as two men, and Ann Eller as a trans woman. And thanks to Ted Chapin and others who took the leap, we finally got to do it at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival in 2018. And it was one of the most joyous projects I've ever worked on. And I thought that Cats originated during that time, but my husband said, no, you've been talking about this for 20 years. I don't think you're right. And then an old friend from LA saw the show here in New York and said, I was so happy to see that you had realized this dream because you've been talking about it for 20 years.
Oh, that's great.
So my husband's memory is better than mine, is the point. It started thinking about an older gay man singing the song Memory in a gay bar. And I just thought that context, the queer context of that, would be very moving in terms of that song. And then the more time I spent with the material, the more I realized, of course, it's not a bar, it's a ball. It's literally in the text again and again and again. The Jellicle Ball, it's an annual ball, it's a competitive ball. And so that context started to get really clear. And I began to work with a gender consultant named Josie Kearns, who's quite brilliant, who became our dramaturg eventually, and Omari Wiles, one of our two co-choreographers. And we began to conceive it, and it became clear that Grisabella was not a gay man. Grisabella was a transgender woman. And, a lot of it flowed from that. We spent about a year creating a pitch deck that we shared with Andrew Lloyd Webber's company. And, I will stop there and let Zhailon pick up his part of the story because everything shifted in the most beautiful way when Zhailon joined this team.
Yeah, well, I just heard that this guy named Bill Rauch was thinking about doing Cats this way, and I didn't know him, he didn't know me, and we hadn't really engaged with each other's work at all. But the moment I heard about this, and it was through the casting director, actually, before they did their first workshop, I was just, something immediately in me was like, this is me on so many levels that I don't think people really know or have access to. I made my mother, and I've told this story, but I made my mother buy the Cats VHS at Blockbuster when I was in second grade, before I even knew what theater was. And she was like, you're not going to watch this. You don't know what this is. And I was like, no, I want to watch this. And apparently I sat like inches away from the television for all 2.5 hours and never moved and didn't say anything and didn't use the restroom, didn't ask for food. And she was like, that's when I knew we had an issue with this person. And I watched it every day for like 2.5 years, not knowing that I was a part of a lot of young queer people's journey in my generation. Actually, I'm only now fully understanding how much that 90s recording of the show actually was kind of like so much a part of like young queer kids who didn't know why they felt weird. Gave them some sense of vocabulary. And then, you become a theater maker. And, I think my generation intersected right when Cats was going from a thing that was like wildly celebrated to a thing that was kind of a joke culturally. And so you go off and you do the serious stuff and you try to prove yourself as this kind of storyteller. And I remember this moment being like, when I heard about Cats, not only seeing immediately the kind of political intersection that like goes right through the kind of work that I'm interested in, but also the ability to actually engage with that younger queer kid who I felt like still had things to say and play about. And so I reached out to Bill through the casting director just for a meeting. And basically, in 2.5 hours or 2 hours, maybe in a Zoom, I was like, I don't really associate direct anymore, but if you're looking for a co director, I think that I have something to say and I would love to do it. And also, if you don't want that, that's completely fine. I will be at opening night. I can't wait. And for some weird reason, Bill was like, let's do this without us ever really knowing each other. And honestly, we may be very different on paper, but working with Bill has been one of just like the most amazing collaborations of my career so far.
Well, that's Bill Rauch in a nutshell.
So just on a practical level, like how does it work to co-direct? Is that
lots of talking? Yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, lots of talking, absolutely, and lots of hours of prep before every rehearsal, and on lunch breaks and dinner breaks, and in the months between workshops, we would talk and talk and talk. But I feel like the trust was so immediate and so mutual between us that we would sometimes just divide up, and Zhailon would take one room, and I would be off in the music room with somebody singing while Zhailon was staging, or vice versa, and then we would build on each other's work, and the very, very rare times when we had different impulses, we would talk about it, and very quickly one of us would convince the other one of what the point of view was, or we would always say, let's try it, let's just try it, let's see.
Yeah, and what I would add to that, just to say, is that I don't think everything is served by being co-directed, but I do believe that projects that feel much bigger than one person's vision, it actually is a very exhilarating way to make something bigger than yourself from day one. And that's kind of how I choose whether or not I'm just directing something or I'm interested in a co-directing thing, because I do that probably more than most of my peers.
It's interesting, by the way, that we're talking so much about joy in the presidential campaign. I think you guys prefigured the joy
so
factor.
true. You really got on to a zeitgeist that's kind of exploding now.
Which is really interesting.
Yeah.
But tell me, or tell us, please, maybe for the audience that is not seeing the show or did not have an opportunity to see the show as it winds up its run at the Perelman PAC. Can you tell us a little about Ballroom, its roots, and how that became the conceit of the show?
Yeah, I mean, just some like kind of the basic ballroom history, and then I have to pass it to Bill at some point. But ballroom really can track back almost 100 years, thinking about queer pageants in the 20s and 30s, which were seen more as pageants. And you can track that to a very particular moment in the late 60s where a queer trans performer named Crystal LaBeija walks off from the stage at a pageant after believing that she was kind of wrongly given second place or third place when she deserved to be first place. And what's fascinating, much like how the Black church got started around this time as well, it's really just an exodus from a institution that we felt unwelcome in, and then starting a counter movement. And so she left that pageant and immediately kind of started the idea of a house, which is this chosen family where a mother and a father kind of work with a group of young queer people, not only in balls to help them compete and win for their house, but also to give them a sense of security in the world, a world that obviously was not accepting of queer and trans people of color at that time. And so from that moment on, you can kind of track the kind of contemporary ballroom history starting in Harlem, and spreading all across New York. And now, to super flash forward, it is really a underground community that is not exclusive to New York anymore and is quite international. And I think serving the same purposes in different countries for those queer people.
Okay, so now for our listeners who have not had the luck to see the show, can you explain a little bit how it works? Like people enter, and then what's the setup? Like how does it work? Like if they're familiar with Cats, which I'm going to assume our listeners are, like what is happening?
Well, the first and most basic thing is that in our production, the characters are human beings. They're not cats.
Right.
So they're human beings who are at a competitive ball. It's an annual ball. It's a big deal in the life of the competitors, as Zhailon has described so beautifully in terms of the ballroom tradition. And so Perelman Performing Arts Center, PAC NYC, where I'm lucky enough to be artistic director, we have 3 relatively intimate spaces, but they can be combined in different ways. In fact, so far we have figured out there are 62 potential audience stage configurations of our 3 spaces. So Cats combines 2 of our theaters into a fairly immersive kind of club setting. There are cabaret tables that are wrap around the runway. It's a 57-foot long runway. So there are traditional theater seats throughout the room, but also these cabaret tables. And the idea was just to immerse the audience in the ball experience. A friend I respect a lot said, "That's not a play, that's a ball. You guys just threw a ball," which I loved. I will say that part of trying to convince Andrew Lloyd Webber's company that this was a good idea, and I can never say enough about the leap of faith that they took and how grateful we are that they took that leap of faith. But part of that process was I got to give Andrew himself a tour of our construction site. The only piece of advice he gave to us was make it immersive, make it environmental. And, that was a real guidepost for me and Zhailon as we worked with our brilliant set designer, Rachel Hauk, that we wanted the audience to be in the room. We wanted it to be happening in the present moment. We wanted the characters to be hyper aware of the audience and that we were all having this experience together.
I think something that people forget sometimes is that original London production, the way in which it was immersive was very emergent in terms of commercial theater at the time. So in that way, our adaptation is in direct conversation with, what made that production distinct at the time.
No, it's right. If I may, Cats actually was the first show I saw on Broadway, and that was the original. I mean, not it was already many years into its run, but I remember distinctly that they were coming out into the aisles. There was a lot of cat mischief interacting with the audience. So you're right, it was really there. But I went to the revival that was the most recent one on Broadway. And I took my wife, who had never seen Cats, and about 20 minutes into it, she leaned and she was like, "This is nuts." And and that was just a pretty faithful, revival. But every time I see the show, I'm reminded that it's nuts. I don't think any new musical now could get away with what it does in terms of the just kind of eccentricity of it. And I feel like your production really gets that. The kind of joyous eccentricity and freedom of being kind of nuts. And I mean nuts in the best possible way, this sense of we can do whatever we want. Was staying in that spirit important to you, of this kind of unbound freedom to be?
I don't think it started with unbound freedom. I think that the kind of unbound freedom, continued to reveal itself. I remember our journey of going from, wait, we're not making a documentary. We're not actually making a literal kind of hour by hour ball. I mean, a documentary already exists. Paris is Burning, and there's a lot of newer works. And we're also not making a traditional musical, obviously. And so, in that way, again, I felt like we were in the spirit of the original show in terms of trying to create some new form. And I think actually, like, what people are feeling is like Cats, the musical, Ballroom, the culture, getting together to create a circus of possibilities. And that's really like the event that people are inside of.
But the conceit also is that it is a competition, which plays into the original, which is the idea that one of the cats will be chosen to go to the Heaviside layer, and you have made some interesting dramaturgical decisions. One of them being that it's you have like, I don't remember who goes up against who, but like Skimbleshanks versus Mistopheles. I mean. I don't remember who remembers what, and then you invite each night 2 judges from the community with some expertise to rate each performance, and you have like it's a sort of a round robin kind of competition where you come down to the winner. We won't reveal, of course, who always wins, but that required, again, some freedom granting from a really useful group and Andrew, I assume.
Absolutely. It was a very iterative process and a very collaborative process to figure out the match between songs and categories. Some of them we knew immediately. Some of them we really had to go through a lot of false starts and a lot of evolution.
What were some of the obvious ones to you where you knew right away, oh, that's going to be this?
Buster for Jones being Body, right, was very, very clear.
Yeah.
And, that opportunity, because the song is so much about how round Buster for Jones has become, and to be able to lean into that as an absolute celebration of body diversity, that felt really clear from the get-go.
And like also just to say, like, clear does not mean easy, just means like that's clearly the choice we should make. And then, I think for a long time we felt that Skimbleshanks could be a contemporary, trained person. But thinking about how to make that work was like one of the more challenging pieces. Like Mungo Jerry and Rumple Teaser, I think for a very long time was always a tag team competition. And then making that work for 3 minutes, that was, ever evolving and, quite difficult.
Can we talk
one of our mantras? I just want to say that Zhailon and I were in absolute, complete agreement about, complete alignment, was a choice has to work for Ballroom and it has to work for Cats the Musical. And if it works in one of those ways but not the other, then we've not pushed ourselves hard enough and we haven't found the right choice yet. And that was very, very useful in terms of guiding us.
I was curious because how did the casting work? Did you, in the rehearsal process, what kind of discussions did you have with the performers? Did their own stories kind of play a part? Like, how did that work in developing their characters?
I mean, the casting took as long to develop as the show itself. And I think in hindsight, because, there is a kind of devised spirit at the center of the how to make this show. You can't just read. If you just read it, you are reading poetry ultimately. And so how to bring a real authenticity to what it means to turn these cats into humans, I think ultimately meant finding, humans who really kind of like had a fascinating way into who these cats were already naturally. I think about Chastity Temperance, who plays Grisabella, like so early in the process when she came in, I think both Bill and I were like, she just is Grisabella. Like, we'll continue to do our due diligence in terms of a casting
Right,
process,
right.
but she is Grisabella.
Yeah,
Like,
got it.
and to see the way that she connected to the material, I think ultimately so many of our casts have a kind of interesting way in that then allows them to kind of bottomlessly investigate the poetry with us. And so it does feel extremely collaborative.
That's so interesting to me because I was wondering about, matching actor with character in this piece particularly. And also what is, the poignance, I think yes, the audience roars, but I think there are a lot of tears too. And I think that somehow the subtext here is this mainstream musical, that is, $1 billion property now claimed by people who have been marginalized and not totally understood, coming together on this stage is in itself a very moving and very meaningful convergence that speaks very loudly to something changing in our culture, and so it really is the specifics of the property and the people that I think really injects an extra level of exhilaration in the audience.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that, and I'm moved by what you said. I will also say that we were very committed early on to the cast being as multi-generational as the characters are described. And
Right.
so the blessing of having Chastity as Grisabella, having Junior LaBeija, of course, the original MC from Paris is Burning, play Gus the theater cat. And of course, the theater deity, Andre de Shields, as Old Deuteronomy. And, in a traditional production of Cats, there is not necessarily alignment between performer age and character age in a way that our human beings version of the story does invite that. And, that was definitely a challenging part of the casting process, but we were clear about that vision. And I've got to say, Victor Vasquez and Sujata Pace of X Casting were endlessly resourceful and really fought for the integrity of the production in terms of there being ballroom representation as well as musical theater representation, and to find the performers in each world who were curious about the world they didn't come from and wanted to dig in and dive in and learn. And that marriage between the two, that fusion, that was part of what was very challenging, but ultimately very satisfying.
It felt
And I think that, yeah.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead,
I was
John.
just going to say, I think you can feel that cast reaching towards each other. And I think sometimes when you mix different mediums in a Broadway show, you think about musical theater performers and circus performers. Like, the delineation is very clear when you're watching it, and can still be entertaining and great. But I think it was so important that the line was as blurry as possible in terms of the worlds in which these people come from.
It's also, the line feels very blurry because, Andre de Shields' entrance is one of the most unbelievable to me theater moments of the year. When he enters and people go nuts, there's this explosion because there's also this awareness that is the character, but it's also the entrance of Andre de Shields.
But also the wig enters 2 minutes before he does.
The wig gets its own dressing room, I'm sure. But that entrance to me is exactly when we go to the theater. There's such this fusion of the actor, the character, the moment where we've been kind of we're really been primed. I seriously, I wish I could see it every week. It felt like I want to mainline it every, that entrance is, words fail me. The sense of just, I wanted to scream, and I really don't feel that very offended the theater, but I was just like, I am losing my marbles right there.
Yeah.
But
And honestly, we didn't know that that would be the response. I mean, like all of this
Yeah.
was just like hoping that people would get it and that it would
Mhm.
resonate. And, you know, before our first audiences, we had the same kind of designer run that any show has. And, you know,
Mhm.
that's not the same audience as the audience we will end up performing for. And
Right.
so we were, you know, in previews in our short preview process, we're very quickly learning, oh, we have created this Frankenstein that causes this thing that's happening to happen. And I think I mean, Bill and I talked a lot about like, how do we make sure this thing feels charged and of an event every night? And I think some of those things were practically like built into the actual physical production, and some of it, like you alluded to earlier, Elizabeth, is like the zeitgeist and the moment and the timing and what people are hungry for and all those things.
Bill, how important was it? You know, this was the capstone of your first season in Lower Manhattan in this new facility. How much pressure did you feel to produce something that would be outsized in terms of the reception? As a long-time artistic director, and maybe Zhailon, you can talk about this too. You know, what does it? How important is it to have a hit?
You know, you can't design a hit. You can because everything that we do as artists and certainly as artistic directors, you see the potential in every project, and you want every project to reach the widest and deepest response. You know, from the deepest response from the widest group of audience members possible.
Mhm.
I will say that the first drafts I did of our inaugural season, I was not going to be part of them as an artist. And then it started to become clearer and clearer that a longer run, perhaps of a musical, was the right way to end the season, and that it could run in the summer. And if we were lucky, maybe we could extend it for a week. Never in our wildest dreams did we think that we would extend it 3 times and basically triple the original length of the run. But you know, it was a moment where I decided, you know, I've got a passion project, and I'd love it to be part of this inaugural season. But then the big question was, would we be able to get the rights? And you know, that journey with the Really Useful group, you know, we could spend our entire podcast time together talking about that because you know, it was a remarkable journey, and I'm so grateful to many people who are part of the Really Useful group.
Was it perhaps somewhat reassuring to them? Because we haven't really made that clear, but the score is very much untouched. I mean, there are a few beats added here and there, but it really is like you're really not messing with the score at all. Like for, you know, the Daniel Fish Oklahoma, they kind of reorchestrated the score pretty drastically, but there's none of that with your version. Like I remember, in fact, seeing it and thinking, oh my God, those synthesizers, like this sounds so analog. And it really is this kind of crazy early 80s synth sound that you really hear a lot in the overture. That feels very like authentic. And then you really don't you don't change lyrics. Like nothing is, it is the score as it is.
It's not a coincidence that the original heyday of ballroom and the birth of Cats happen around the same time. That they grow out of, you know, late 70s, 80s period of time, and the early days of the AIDS epidemic. I think there is an absolute connection there. And as Zhailon said, the number of young queer artists and middle-aged queer artists who talked about the way their lives were changed by that 1998 video. The fact that they could prance around the living room because they were being cats, to have it be accepted by their family members. And people would tear up in the audition room talking about what Cats meant to them. I had no idea of that.
And what's always been really fascinating to me too, and I don't know if you've seen this yet, Bill, but I've just started to clock. There's sometimes ballroom guest judges and legends who come to guest judge, and you can see them lip singing. parts of the score.
That's great.
And you just don't realize how entrenched this property is inside of so many of us.
So, Zhailon, take me to this little kid who spent 2.5 years watching the video every day, and suddenly, you're an artist, and you're creating this thing, and it comes out of your pores, and you realize that whatever was inside, other people appreciated what you had done with this piece that was your introduction to theater. What are you going through personally, emotionally, as this thing evolves?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I'm trying to receive as much of it as I can receive and understand that probably a great portion of it I won't really understand unless there's some real hindsight. I'm trying to accept the impact it's having on others, which is so overwhelming. And I'm sure I'll get a vacation one day and really process what the impact means for me. But just to say, the beginning of Act 2 is a song called "The Moments of Happiness." And there's this kind of video of ballroom history that is shown, and we try to honor the original house mothers and all this kind of stuff. And to me, that number is actually the heart of the event that is Cats the Jellicle Ball. It is the reason why there is this unexplainable thing that people are feeling. There's a lyric in The Moments of Happiness that says, "The moments of happiness, we've had the experience, but we miss the meaning. An approach to the meaning restores the experience in a different form." And to me, that's how I'm defining what this revival is. And on every level, both personal and kind of communal, we are trying to do that. And so when you talk about that little kid, it's like, I had that experience with Cass. And in that moment, I didn't have the hindsight of its impact on me. But if I approach it again, it can show up in a different form that completely is healing and transformative and also contagious on the impact of others in some kind of way. And I think that it's no coincidence that there is something lost in the film version of that show in them omitting that song.
That's a good point.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about the future for the show, but also for both of you and what your projects are? It's really rare to have like a hit of that size. And of course, I'm sure there's questions of like, where could it go next? Personally, I was thinking, it would be great at like Circle in the Square or some made to measure place. Someone was telling me that Limelight, the old disco, is being turned into a performing venue, which to me would be like so great. It's a church that was turned into a club, and then I think it became like a mall or something, like a mini mall. It's a weird history for that venue.
Downtown.
But so there's like various, places that, is that, I'm sure it's part of the conversation. Like, what are there plans like that people who missed it will get a chance to see it?
I'm going to take this one. Yes, Sheila?
Yes.
What I can say is we are incredibly clear that we want the production to have a longer life.
Yes.
And we don't know what form that will take, but, we want to share it with as many queer young people and their allies as possible. And, people of all generations have been moved by the show, but I think Zhailon and I have a special heart pull to the young people in the audience. I had an old friend who sobbed in my arms after coming out of the show and said, "Can you imagine if we had seen this when we were 15 years old, how it would have changed the trajectory of our lives, You
might have gone into theater.
I might have gone into theater, for instance.
Yeah.
There you go. So
It's so true, though. That's so true. I think of that all the time. Even if I was 15 and we're generations apart, it would have changed my life wildly to have seen something like that. That's how new I think this level of representation is. And, you talk about the young people, Bill, but I also think about the older generations that I've been able to connect with as a young person.
Absolutely.
Ken Page was a guest judge and sobbed in my arms after seeing the show. And I was like, I'm holding Ken Page. What is happening right now? And I just last
In the
night when I
original
was at the
production,
show,
for people who didn't
yeah,
know. Right.
Yes,
he
played
was
Old
older
Deuteronomy.
than
in the
me.
original
Right.
production.
Yeah, and even just as recently as last night, there were some elder ballroom gentlemen who were in the guest judge VIP area, and they were like, they just went up to me and they were like, "We've been in ballroom for 50 years. We could never have imagined that an institution like this would turn this whole place into this thing that we were being criminalized for." And so I was like, that's a lot of history to just be
Right.
confronted with.
Right.
Well,
So we are just to answer the question more directly, we are exploring all options, and obviously it's ultimately up to Andrew and up to the Really Useful Group. But whether it comes back to PAC NYC someday, whether there is another site-specific venue, whether there's traditional theater that can be morphed, we would love to bring it to other cities around the country, and maybe even someday other cities around the world. So we want this cats to have 9 lives. There's no question.
yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I guess we should wrap this up and let you
Yes.
guys go. But the question is, Andrew came to see it, and Andrew clearly has wants his works to last, and he's seeing things in maybe through new eyes in the last couple of years with some of his productions, like Sunset Boulevard, which is coming to Broadway in a very different form. What did he think? What was his reaction when he saw the show?
Yo,
What can you
direct
share
quote-
about that?
Direct quote that I can share is, I thought it was fantastic. It was
Oh, that's good.
fantastic. And he also talked to the cast quite extensively after the show and showed them love, which I think meant the most to me, to see him really appreciate the rigor and the work of what those individuals have to do every single night. And he has been incredibly supportive since seeing the show.
One of his quotes is, "I've rarely been in a theater with so much love and joy." And that will get to the heart of the matter, And I think it's really, really, really to his credit that he's been willing to take risks with some really beloved properties of his and let artists reinterpret them, respectfully, but also radically. And that's pretty unusual for a living composer.
Well, I see.
Actually, Peter, I have one more question. I wanted to very briefly to get a sense of what you guys are up to next, because I know, for instance, Zhailon, you have a show that I can't wait to see. You're doing Table 17 at MCC with Carrie Young. Can you briefly describe what? Because I think it's clearly
It's great.
very
It's great.
different.
It's so good. So
Thank
good.
you, Bill. Bill did come recently. So, Table 17 is a brand new play by Douglas Lyons, who I did Chicken and Biscuits with, which is the show I made my Broadway debut on as a director. And it tells the kind of full circle love story of a young woman named Jada and a young man named Dallas, who meet 2 years after their breakup, having not spoken to each other, at a restaurant called Bianca's. And we kind of go back in time and back to that table to kind of learn how they got there and be with them as they figure out what it might mean for them to still be drawn to each other.
Great.
A two-hander.
And Bill, you're planning a season.
I am indeed planning our second season and beyond. I'm also lucky enough to be working in a workshop of a new musical by Michael John LaChiusa, and that is a fun adventure that I'm looking forward to.
Excellent.
Well, great. I don't know. Maybe there's a ballroom Sweeney Todd or something. I don't know. I feel
Stop
like it's a
it.
whole.
Stop.
I feel like there's a whole.
You have to be stopped.
I think you've birthed a genre.
You have to be
you
stopped.
guys. I want more. I think Livingston and Rauch is a great name for a musical writing.
Hey, let's
That's
do it.
true.
Anyway.
That's true. That's
I,
true.
I said to Zhailon just yesterday that I have a new reason to want to have, because I'm substantially older than Zhailon, and I have a new reason to want to live as long as I possibly can, because I want to see as many decades as possible of what Zhailon Livingston is going to do in the American theater.
Wow.
Because I know it is going to be so breathtaking and remarkable.
Oh, that goes on
Man's
Zhailon's reel. That goes on his reel.
Yes.
So thank you both for spending some time with us. It's been really, really fun.
Thanks for inviting
Thank
us.
y'all.
And so for now, it's running until September 8th. So hurry and go into the waiting list, I guess.
That's right.
Yeah, it is sold out. But come, show up. Something might happen.
Well, listen, thanks. That was great.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us. It was so fun. to
Yeah,
talk to
so
you.
fun.
They are in the Cats Pantheon now and forever, I think.
Is that forever? Is that if you have like 90 lives? Because I've lost count.
Yeah. At least.
You know, Peter, what surprises me is that you're famous as a dog person. Like our listeners know, they've heard all about Trevor.
Mm-hmm.
You're into, in fact, I think I should call you Peter Barks. That's my new name for you, Peter Barks. But okay, regardless of your love for dogs and my love for rabbits, this was categorically fantastic.
Ooh, nicely done. Well, we'll have to add this episode to our catalog.
I knew you were going to go there. I knew you were going to go there, and so it begins.
The interview was not a catastrophe.
I can't do this. I can't do this.
No.
Oh my
It's
God.
the show is the
He's not
general,
gonna
the
stop.
genuine. It's the
no.
genuine article. We did not catfish anyone with this show.
No, I really am Elisabeth Vincentielli. You're not being
No,
catfished.
don't be
This is
catty.
So bad.
Don't be catty.
We're sinking to a new Catskills low, which, of course,
Ooh,
another.
good one. You didn't even know you did that.
I mean it.
We're losing it. So
I think we have lost it. We have lost.
I'm
we're
Peter
beyond
Marks.
losing it.
I'm
God.
live next time from Kathmandu. That's the next place we're going to play them. Join us. I'm going to just read this because we're supposed to read things. I'm Peter Marks. Join us for another episode of Marks and Vincentielli. You'll find us on marksvincentelli.substack.com.
And I said already, I'm Elisabeth. I was trying to figure out Catincelli.
No.
No, it's not working. Okay. Okay, so some social. I'm still, again, I am going to leave. I'm going to leave X. I'm going to leave Twitter. I'm going to do
Good.
it. This is my pledge. But I'm also on Threads. And Peter is on Threads. And we use our real names, unfortunately, for us and you and everybody. So, ta-ta for now.
Meow.